So here's one of the places I'm going to come and look for some lichen. I can see some up in the trees there. This is St. Finbarr's well. It's a very, very ancient well founded by St. Finbarr, I think in the 6th or the 7th century. And it's a very sad place in a way because it's the place where all the unbaptized babies were buried over the centuries. This went on till only just a few years ago. So people used to bring their dead babies here and bury them secretly at night. As you can see on the tree, there's all kinds of bits and pieces tied up, and inside the field there's a tree that's also similarly decorated, and people used to do that and come and pray here and do rounds. This is a part of the old island. So as you can see, every time some people pass, they tie something to the tree. Some more. These old customs never die out. So here I found some trees that I can use. There's an old hawthorn, and there's another one, and there's an old ash tree, and they would be considered sacred together. And if you look at the little crosses in the background, that's where the well is, and that's where people do their rounds. That means they come and pray for a certain purpose. And a lot of these wells are healing wells too. So here I've got a wonderful cache of lichen, so I'll start picking it. I'm not going to take much, just the lichen doesn't damage the tree, but it does choose trees to grow on which are dying because they need plenty of light. This is the type of lichen I'm really interested in. It's got like long hairs. It's supposed to be a sign of very clean air. So here there's some hawthorn berries, and I'll be taking them in little groups. I like the dull red colour. I was thinking of putting a bit of holly on my wreath, but I think this dull red will look better with the lichen and the moss. So these are hawthorn, also known as whitethorn. And the birds love them. They're a tree you come across a lot in Ireland because you find them in hedgerows. So here's another branch covered in lichen. From what I understand, lichen is made up out of a fungus and an algae, and they co-inhabit, and they don't do any damage to the tree itself. They just live on it, and they need very fresh air, and they need light, and they gather their food out of the air, and I suppose from rain. They've got no roots. This particular tree near the well, there's a legend attached to it that if you damage the tree or take a branch off it or chop it down, then very bad luck will happen to you. And the story goes that in the 19th century, the farmer who owned this land chopped down the tree, and that night his house burnt down. So make of it what you wish. But here again you see where people have been hanging just bits, just anything they can find in their pocket, and they hang it on the tree. It's a lovely quiet spot here. When you follow the brow of that hill, there's a path running along the river, and I think that was the original road into town in the old days. It leads to Castle Donovan, which is the town nearest my town. As you can see, it's all very flooded for the moment after all the rain we've had. And in this particular bit is where all the babies are buried. There's a proper graveyard next door, and that's been in use since about the year 500 or 600, so it's very, very old. It's about 1500 years old. I'll show you that in a minute. So here's this old graveyard. As I said, it's about 1500 years old, and quite a few stones, quite a few graves are only just marked with a stone. There's an old chapel, the left remnants of an old chapel there, and it's purported to be the graveyard where the McCarthys are buried. So the local chief in this area were the McCarthys, and this is their burial ground. There also used to be a monastery here in the early Middle Ages, so before the year 1000. A lot of people from my street are buried here. And here you can see just plain stones that mark graves. So every time somebody died, they reopened the grave and then put a new stone on the pile, and families remembered where their graves were. It's a lovely, peaceful spot. All you hear is bird song. Here's something else I'm looking for. They're the seed heads of ivy. I'm planning to paint them gold. Later on in the winter they turn completely black, and birds love them. So here's a tree that's covered in lichen, and that's the colour effect I'd like to go on for on my wreath. It's completely covered from top to bottom. It's a mountain ash or rowan, and they're trees are quite popular here in Ireland. So when you see the play of the moss and the lichen together, it's so beautiful. It's so textured. So there's lots and lots of lichen on this tree. And there's lots of the kind I like, the hairy kind. And this is a larch. There's lots of picking there too. So here we have a holly. Another thing I want is, if you see those clumps inside that silver birch, they're called witches' brooms, and I think they're caused by some kind of parasite that then makes the tree grow these clumps of little tiny twigs, and that's something else I want for my wreath. And luckily enough, there's a branch here on the ground, so I'll go and pick some of those. Again, plenty of lichen on the tree. So here's some more. And there's also plenty of lichen on that tree, so there's plenty of lichen in this neighborhood. But wherever you see those balls of little fine twigs, they're quite special, really. So here's my haul from my trip to the hedgerow, and now I'm going to start assembling my wreath. I'm getting quite excited. Everything I've collected I found within less than half a mile from my home, so it's going to be a true West Cork wreath.